Right, sourdough, guys. I promised you this video last week. I'm sorry, I've been down with the weather, so I haven't done it. What is sourdough? What are we using to make bread? Essentially, flour and water. That's it. It's plain and simple. Obviously, in your bread recipe, you can add a bit of salt. But for your starter, all you need is a jar, a clean jar, some flour, and some water. Tap water's not ideal. People use mineral water. I just use water that's been through the filter jug because we have hard water in this area. So I use a filter jug to fill the kettle. So I just use the water out of a filter jug to maintain my sourdough starter. And it works fine. It's not a problem. Any type of flour will work. You don't need a fancy flour to make this work. You can do this with anything. Plain flour, wholemeal flour, bread flour. Just don't use self-raising flour because that's got a raising agent in it. That's just going to make things get crazy bubbly and not do what you want it to do. You can use fancier flours like spelt flour. Wholemeal flour is quite good, and spelt flour and rye flour and things can be used once you get a bit more experience with sourdough. They are quite good because they contain a lot more of the husk, they're a lot more of the grain, so there's more beneficial yeast, bacteria, whatever you want to call it, on the flour. Okay, so essentially we're utilising the yeast that naturally lives on the flour, that is in the air around us, and water to grow our sourdough culture. This is a culture essentially. We are growing a little jar of yeasty beasties, as I like to call them. So Sid's been in the fridge since last weekend, so about a week and a half. I haven't taken him out. I haven't fed him. He doesn't get fed very regularly, to be quite honest. He only gets fed when I use him. So how often should you feed your sourdough starter is a question that comes up a lot. Depends really honestly on how often you're using it. When you're first making your sourdough starter, you need to feed it every day for about a week or so, until it gets up to the size and the activity level that you want. I say activity level. Once it's bubbly and it's growing well, then you can stop feeding it at that point. You can start using it. You will quite often hear the term discard when it comes to sourdough. Now, something that it sounds really confusing and people get a bit over the top about discarding. I've never thrown any of this away, ever. I've never discarded any sourdough starter. When I start a culture, and this is about the third one we've had, he's about 2 years old now. Sid's 2 years old. He's been in this jar for a couple of years, and the only previous ones have not worked either because I haven't used them for long enough, or I have left them too long and they've died. So he's done well. Sometimes I don't use them for a couple of months. I don't make bread every day or every week. So, but I do make it when I can, and I don't always make sourdough. Sometimes I will just make bread with a packet of yeast from the supermarket because who's got time to wait for this to work? Not me every day. So, I don't feed him every day, but when you're growing your starter, you do need to feed him every day. He's been in this jar for about 2 years. I've never discarded any of him. Discard is just unfed starter. That's it. Simple. Really simple. Discard is unfed starter. You don't need to throw half of it away before you use it. Take out what you want to use for your recipe and feed the other half and put it back in the fridge. That's it. Simple. Let's make this easy. So I am going to feed Sid today only because when I last used him I used more than half of his bulk, and I want to use him in the next couple of days, so I'm going to give him an extra feed, which I wouldn't normally do, but just because we're down on size a little bit. So I'm going to bulk him out a little bit and give him a feed. So I'll show you how I do that now. But I won't throw half of him away while I feed him. Now he's mature, I'm not going to weigh out what I'm feeding either. So let me grab some bits and we'll feed him. Okay, so this is just plain flour. You can use bread flour, just don't use self-raising flour. You can use wholemeal, white, whatever you want to feed your starter with. So I'll just show you what it looks like now. So really nice and bubbly, and that's after a week and a half of being in the fridge. Sid's lived in this jar for 2 years. I have never cleaned this jar, apart from cleaning around the top. That's the only bit I keep clean, is the rim and the lid. And this top bit of the jar. Inside, I've never swapped them out. I've never changed jars. I scrape around when I mix them up. As you can see, not mouldy. Okay, and he's literally been in that jar for 2 years. So you don't need to change the jar every week and wash it. Just not overcomplicate this, guys. No one did this 100 years ago when they were making bread, okay? They made it straightforward. Plain flour. I generally do about 3 big tablespoons. That's just me, my personal preference, okay? If you want to weigh it out, weigh it out. I would do it when you first start with your starter. Once it's grown and it's mature, you don't need to weigh it out. Make your life easy. Filter water. Again, some. I'm not measuring here. If it's too dry, I'll add a bit more water. If it's too wet, I'll add a bit more flour. That simple. And then we're going to give them a good stir. Get rid of all the lumps of flour. Give the sides a little scrape round, give him a good mix. And he's going to go back in the fridge straight after this feed, because I'm not going to use him today. I'm probably not going to use him tomorrow. It's probably going to be towards the end of the week when I use him. So this is just a feed to add some bulk, because I want to use about 200 grams when I make a loaf of bread. I'll use of this starter. And depending on your recipes, it's going to depend on how much starter you're going to use when you make your loaf. I use about 200 grams of starter to about 500 grams of flour, and I add around 250 to 300 mils of water, depending on how the dough consistency is, depending on what flour I use. If I use wholemeal flour, I'm going to need a lot more water because it absorbs a lot more water, so you need more water with wholemeal flour. I'm going to use white flour, I'm not going to use as much water. So I'll start with around 200 mils, I'll mix it. If it's not dry, if it's not wet enough, I'll add a bit more. I go by feel rather than exact measurements. Obviously I'll weigh out the starter and I'll weigh out the flour, and then I mix it together. You can mix your starter with some warm water and turn it into like a liquid soup before you mix it with your flour. That's fine. Some people like to do that. I can't be bothered. Quite honestly, I've not found it made any difference to making the bread, so I will just chuck it all in a bowl and I will give it a good mix. You can add your salt at this point. You can wait and add your salt later. It's up to you. It depends on how active your starter is as to when you're going to add your salt. If your starter's not that active, or it's quite young, or you're not getting the rise that you want, then you can leave the salt until a bit later. Do it when you mix it in, give it an hour and then mix it in. I'll put it in generally when I start making the bread, just because I can't be bothered to get it out and mix it again, to be quite honest with you. Sid's old enough now that he can cope with salt being added to the dough. Either is fine, whatever works for your starter. Play around with it. It's not an exact science, and it's all going to very much depend on how your starter reacts to stuff. So what I do might not work for your starter, might be great for your starter. It really depends on how strong it is, how old it is, what your ratios are, and also it's its own yeast, it's its own culture. So every starter is going to be different because it comes from a different area. There's different yeast in the flour, there's different yeast in the air, there's different yeast introduced from you touching it, you breathing around it, all sorts, you know, your environment. So it's really, there's no one size fits all. Just don't overcomplicate it, guys. So here we go. Some people like their starters thicker than this. That is fine. It's like a thick porridge. I'm good with that. That's me done. He's mixed. He's going back in the fridge. Next time I see him, I'll be making bread, and I'll film that so you guys can see how I make a loaf and what Sid looks like after he's been in the fridge a few days after a feed. I could leave him out on the side, so I'll mark the height. I'll keep a rubber band on the side to mark the height of where he is, so that when I feed him or am getting him out before I use him, or I want to see how well he's working, if I'm feeding him and leaving him out on the side, I can see where he's risen and dropped down to again. So, and it just gives me an indication of how much I have in the jar, to be honest with you. A lot of people won't keep this much. They'll keep a little jam jar, they'll feed it up before they want to use it. And that's where you get discard come from, is people will keep a small amount and use half of it or throw half of it away. I don't know. I've never really got it. Discard is just unfed starter. So discard recipes is you're just using unfed starter. My general bread making, I use discard. Okay, so I don't feed Sid before I mix him in with the flour and the water to make the loaf of bread that I'm going to make. You can, but you need to wait for that starter to rise and then drop back down again, because if you feed it and then mix it in with flour straight away, you've essentially fed it twice and fed it a huge amount. You can feed it, some people wait for it to peak and use it at its peak. It's not hungry, it's full at that point. It works for some starters, it doesn't work for Sid. He's not interested once he's full. So sometimes I'll feed him, let him rise, let him drop back down, and then I'll add him to my flour and water for my dough mix, if I'm going to bake with him. If I'm not using him straight away, just goes back in the fridge. And quite honestly, he lives in the fridge sometimes for weeks, month, without being fed, and he's fine. Okay. One thing you will get, which you won't have seen today because he's been out in the last week, but if you get a starter that's been sat in the fridge for a little while, you might get a thin layer of dark liquid on top, and that is normal. Okay, that is called lees, and you can just tip it off. Okay, I will just pour that off, and you can pour that down the sink because it is just water. It's just excess water from the starter and waste. Okay, so you can tip that off. When do you need to worry? If your starter goes mouldy, throw away, start again. Okay, it's not difficult to make one, so throw it away, clean your jar. Some people would try and scoop the mould out and save it. Personally, I wouldn't bother. That's just asking for it to go mouldy again, quite honestly. If your starter smells like vinegar, it's gone too far the other way. You can save them sometimes, but quite honestly, it's probably not worth it. Throw it in the bin, start again, clean your jar, and start fresh and find something that works for you. So it shouldn't be an exact science, you know. We've made it really complicated, and it doesn't need to be complicated. Sourdough comes from making bread pre shop bought yeast being available. Brewers would have had yeast, bakers would have had yeast a little while, 100 years or so ago, but once upon a time we didn't have commercial yeasts. We didn't use commercial yeasts. People made bread using this aerobic yeast method. You're using the natural cultures in the environment, in the air. They weren't going to be measuring it out exactly, feeding it and throwing half of it away, because you didn't throw anything away. They weren't going to be taking it out every hour and doing stretch and folds with it when it was waiting to... No one had time for that, because everyone was busy working really hard to grow things and make things and provide food for their families and cook and clean. So no one got their bread out every hour and stretch and fold it, and you don't need to do that either. Okay, when we come to bread making, I will talk to you about how I make sourdough the lazy way, because I am a lazy baker, I will admit that. Alright, I love cooking, I love baking, but I am all for making it easy. I am all for a lazy recipe, quite honestly. As you'll see when we get to making bread. What I might do as well, if people want, is do a video on how to make a starter, and we'll make another starter. I started with wholemeal and plain flour, a mixture. It was like 50-50. So as you can probably, I don't know if you can see, as you can see, there's texture. That's where he's been created, with wholemeal flour. So every now and then I'll give him a food with some wholemeal flour. Most of the time I just use plain white flour like this, but every now and then I might chuck some wholemeal in just to surprise him, just to give him a bit of something different to eat. It just adds a bit more natural yeasts and things into the starter as well. So next time we'll do a video on making bread. We'll make a loaf, show you how I make my sourdough. It's not complicated. I'm here to make it easy for you, rather than make it complicated. I am going to shut up now because I have been waffling on for quite a while. But thank you for listening if you have. Thank you for watching if you have. If you could give me a little like if you like this video. If you've got any questions, then pop them down below. If you've got any any comments or any suggestions for videos, then let me know as well. Bread making is going to be next, and then we might do some other bits and pieces as well. And pheasant season is upon us, so we'll have some videos of us out on the shoot. I might do some pheasant prepping videos as well if anyone's interested in that. How to prep the bird, how to cure the skins, so you keep the skins for training, all sorts of things. So and how to use as much of the carcass as we can, we'll do. So if you've got any other things, any questions, any suggestions, anything you want to see, then hit me up below and we'll see if we can get some more videos on the go. We're going to be back in the veg patch this week as well, hopefully. It's nice out there at the moment, it's quite sunny, it's very warm for October. Was waiting for it to get colder to plant my garlic, but I think I'm just going to have to get it in the ground, otherwise it's going to rot or disintegrate in the greenhouse. So that's another little job that's coming up. But I'll see you all soon. I'm going to shut up now. Take care guys, bye.